Thank you, Patrick. America has long proclaimed itself to be a nation of immigrants, yet our policy for decades brings into question just how welcoming we are. Many who journey from other countries see the United States as their only hope for safety and prosperity. In his new book, Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here, author and award-winning writer at The New Yorker takes an intimate look at the lives of those who attempt the journey. And Jonathan Blitzer, the author, joins me now. Hi, John. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
So the book takes us across time over a half a century of immigration, failed mostly immigration policy. But here's what's interesting. You don't do this through the lens of legislative efforts or legislative history. Really, this is through the eyes, specific narrative stories of individuals who made the journey, people like Juan Ramagosa, who I'm going to talk to you about. You know these people. Talk about that.
Yeah, these are people I've come to know over the course of many years of reporting. And the experience I've had getting to know them has been that in some ways, the most eloquent and kind of forceful explanation of what U.S. immigration policy has looked like, what U.S. relations have been like with countries in Central America, what this has all meant in political terms, in policy terms. All of these things come through, I think, the most clearly through actual lives of individuals who have had to make the trip to the United States for different reasons, but more or less in every case, trying to come to the U.S. to seek protection through the asylum system. And so, yep.
John, let me pick up there, because in writing the book, you know, it was critical you select the right people who can tell the story that you wanted, to the right sources, if you will. How did you make those selections?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I mean, the thinking was that one of the key elements of the history here was to capture the full sweep of how we got to the present moment. And you can't understand that present moment without reference to the 1980s. And so, you know, one of the key kind of figures in this book, Juan Ramagosa, is at the center of it all precisely because he allows us to move through that decade in time and to come to understand the kind of legacy of those years. And each of the other figures, there's another main figure in the book who's from El Salvador, another who's from Honduras, a fourth who's from Guatemala. The idea is that each of these people in some way or another helps unlock this broader history and allows us to see exactly how some of these forces have played out over time.
It's clear from the book that there's a theme to U.S. immigration policy, which, as you say it, is sort of like, don't come. And as we've lived that for years, the primary goal has been deterrence. But how successful, actually, according to the work you've done, has that policy been?
Well, you know, the attitude of successive U.S. administrations, whether Democrat or Republican, has always been that if the government increases its harshness at the southern border, if it increases the degree to which it enforces immigration laws there, and it treats people very harshly, whether in the form of detention or immediate deportation, then somehow the message will get out in the region and in the wider world that you can't make the trip to the United States southern border with any sort of expectation that you get through. The problem is that people who are fleeing for their lives, whether it's that they're fleeing to the United States for protection, whether they're fleeing for opportunity, whatever the circumstances may be, people are making those calculations to leave based on a level of urgency and desperation, things that a deterrence policy at the U.S. southern border isn't going to change. And so deterrence on its own doesn't change the broader dynamics of people who are coming to the United States out of a deep need, unless deterrence is paired in some sort of more thoroughgoing way with an overhaul of the immigration system to allow people legal avenues to come to the United States. The border policies alone are never going to change the broader regional and global dynamics.
Well, you know, and this is a country where people are proud to say we're a nation of immigrants. Most of us come from somewhere else. The truth is, as you read your book, it raises the question as to just how proud we should be of that phrase. And you go back to the Carter administration, the fact that Reagan kind of was told, leave this alone as an area. But, you know, as I'm reading this, I was thinking back to even the 1930s, 40s, when ships of Jewish people came to the country, were turned away by this country, sent back to be slaughtered. We've never really gotten this immigration thing down properly, have we?
No, and you know, I think maintaining an asylum system, which basically means extending protection to people in need who arrive at our southern border, or at any of our borders for that matter, is not a convenient, easy thing as a policy matter. And that's part of the point of it. And so I think it's really important to get across that there is a historical weight to the imperative we have as a country, as a prosperous, wealthy country to extend protection to people who come here seeking relief and seeking opportunity. That is woven into the fabric of our country. The problem is the politics have always been ugly. I think they've gotten even uglier over the last decade or so. But it's never been easy to maintain a system like the asylum system. In fact, the asylum system as we know it didn't even really exist until the 1980s. And even then it was troubled for geopolitical reasons. And so it's important for us to reinforce that ethos, because I do think it's a defining fact of American life.
John, really briefly, the title of the book, Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here. It's an interesting title. They're not your words. They came from Juan Ramagosa. Explain.
I appreciate that. Yeah, they are Juan's words. Juan was involved. He is a doctor who had been tortured in 1980 by the Salvadoran National Guard and eventually reached the United States and got involved in a human rights trial involving two war criminals, generals from El Salvador, who had been living in Florida for many years. And Juan, at the trial, had to testify about all of the hardships he'd experienced, and specifically this horrific torture he had endured in El Salvador in 1980, and was describing to me what it felt like to be standing in front of a jury in Florida, in the United States, in 2002, which is to say decades after he had suffered this torture. And he said basically that he at least had scars to show a jury. He at least was around to tell his story. But all of these other people he knew, family members, friends, colleagues, had died. And he said he felt that they were with him, that everyone who was gone is here with him in the courtroom as he was testifying.
Yeah, a powerful moment, Jonathan Blitzer. It's a tough book to read, meaning it's just so packed with information and emotion. Congratulations on this. You can check out the book wherever books are sold and online at penguinrandomhouse.com. You can also find more information about Jonathan Blitzer on X at Jonathan Blitzer. Thank you, John.
Thanks again.